Now we will honor Alex Karakozoff, offensive guard and football team captain from the class of 1977. Alex was Stanford's first two-time All-Pac-8 first-team selection at offensive guard. He also played lacrosse on the farm and was the Contra Costa arm wrestling champion. It's a pretty big deal, man. I'm not going to mess with him. Alex is founder and general partner at ALK Angel Holdings and is co-patent holder for 2 innovative social media applications. Join me in welcoming Alex Karakozoff and his presenter and former teammate, Brad Williams. All right.
So this is going to be very interesting because my presenter, Brad Williams, hasn't made it yet. So I'm going to call down John Olenchok. John, come on down. Where are you? So John's a very interesting guy. He's a very successful real estate man here in the Bay Area. And John was the guy that brought me into the arm wrestling Contra Costa County. So he's a longtime resident and one of the top athletes ever out of the Antioch area. So John, you're filling in for Brad, our very good friend.
Well, I can't bloviate as well as him. You know, I got a phone call early this morning from Brad Williams asking me for some anecdotes or stories or anything I could do to help him write, you know, the presentation that you're now asking me to stand in and give. And I will tell you, and I have no idea which direction Brad would have taken this, but what I told Brad was very succinct, and I put it in a text message. If I can remember, I said, you know, Alex was a relentless competitor. If you couldn't get away from initial contact with Alex, and I know this because I was a linebacker and he was an offensive guard, and I would seek him out every day in practice to try to get better because he was that good. But if you couldn't get away from initial contact with Alex, he would bury you into the ground. You know, his feet would still be moving and you'd be in a hole. He was a guy that unusually, you know, for an offensive lineman, he would cover the field. I mean, he would play sideline to sideline. You know, he wouldn't just take care of business up front at the snap of the ball. He'd go looking for trouble. He had a lot of nasty in his game, is how I like to term it. And by the way, that Contra Costa arm wrestling, that is a big deal. That is a big deal. Eastern Contra Costa County, when Alex would come out every summer, 4th of July, we had a tug-of-war team, and they had the arm wrestling championships. And in those years, Eastern Contra Costa County was all steel mills, paper mills, canneries, a lot of blue collar, a lot of big, strong people, and Alex would just come out there and dominate those guys too. But the thing I remember most about Alex, I met Alex, I was 17 years old, and I was honored to be selected to the North-South Shrine game, which was a high school all-star game that was played down in the Los Angeles Coliseum in those years. And on the North team were a number of guys, Alex Karakozoff, Andy Kolesnikow, Jerry Argust, Roger Greer. These were all guys that were coming into Stanford on full-ride scholarships as football players. And then there were several other guys that were great football players that were going to Cal. And just being around those guys that week and playing that game with them convinced me that you know, that I want to go follow those guys. They're going to Stanford. So I ended up walking on at Stanford and grabbing onto his coattails. And here I am today talking about, you know, a guy that to me epitomized a Stanford man. I mean, just a class act, took care of business in the classroom. I think you were an econ major. And since then has oddly enough ended up in Montreal in Quebec, Canada, a place near and dear to my heart. Having been a startup and venture capitalist and run a number of businesses, and a St. Ignatius grad, hell of a tradition there, just a fine guy, fine family guy. Remember, his parents would cook dinner for us occasionally. His dad looked like, was a very handsome, tall man, it looked like one of the white Russian generals from the era of the czars. But there we go.
You're moving on here. Come on, keep going.
Anyway, I don't know what else I can tell you about Alex. If Brad were here, I'm sure he's got a heck of a lot more stories, but Delthouse, just a wonderful guy, and it's been a privilege to know you, and I'm honored to be your friend and congratulate you. Appreciate it.
As we say, a Stanford man is always ready, and that's the example right there. You know, Andy Warhol said that in the future, everyone will be world famous for 15 minutes. So I guess this is my 15 minutes, but wait a minute. The athletic department's going to be 5 minutes, so you owe me 10 more now. It's quite an honor to be inducted along with all these great athletes, Olympians, NCAA champions. It's quite a rare breed. And those of you who took Latin, I was known as offensium linimus, which is offensive lineman in football. For those of you who aren't football fans, offensive linemen are the species who do all the work for the other species. The quarterbacks, the running backs, they all get the money and the attention, and oh, by the way, the girls. In my era, offensive linemen were nondescript. We were only announced for something bad, like a penalty, or letting the quarterback get sacked. I was part of that elite nondescript fraternity, and even though I led the team for the 4 years I was there in minutes played, I never once got player of the game. But finally, at the Oregon game my senior year, I recovered two fumbles. So I actually begged to be on the punt team because I wanted to do something positive, like tackle somebody, instead of being, always criticized for something you did badly. So I get up to the radio booth, and I know Mr. Klein's not here, but he and Bob Murphy were in the booth. And Bob, as many of you know, is kind of a funny guy. He says, "Alex, what are you doing here? You're an offensive lineman. You don't belong here." So I said, "But Bob, I recovered 2 fumbles, and they were caused by James Lofton, another great Hall of Famer." And he said, "Come on, you got to interview me. It's the only time I've ever been on the air." I said, "Okay, just this one time." So anyway, that's my story. I'm sticking to it. The theme of my induction is there's 3 things that mold a young man, and I think family, high school, and university. And I have attendees here from all 3 of those. I'll tell you about my family first. My parents were immigrants. My mom was 16 when she came over. She went to business school, graduated. She's here. She's 92 years old. It's right there. She had to leave. Her family had to leave Croatia when the Nazis were coming. My father left Siberia at the age of 7. They traveled over 1,000 miles, much of it by foot, to China to take a boat to San Francisco. They weren't allowed into San Francisco. They set on to Mexico, and shortly thereafter, they were smuggled in by some friends. And yes, my father is an illegal alien. Somehow he got his citizenship later. He proceeded to get a football scholarship at the University of Spoiled Children, also known as USC, where in those days, after an unfortunate injury, he lost his scholarship. So he went up to the University of Washington, and he graduated there. They had a program where you could work 6 months in the Alaskan mines and 6 months that you could be in school at Seattle and get a degree in 2 years. So yes, you could graduate in those days without a lot of student debt. But you have to live in the mine. He eventually opened several restaurants, and consistent with his roots, he made me start working at 9 years old. So I was in a restaurant working as a busboy at 9 years old in the financial district in San Francisco. So I think I learned a little bit of work ethic there. In high school, I learned discipline. And one of my very favorite coaches here, Tom Kennedy, I've got a great story about you, Tom, so get ready. I was a public school kid until the San Francisco schools became like a war zone in the 70s. I was accepted into St. Ignatius, and it's also known affectionately in San Francisco as the high school with carpets. And so I'll never forget Father McCurdy. I fell asleep in his class, the religion class. And he took one of those, I don't know if they have them anymore, yardsticks, and he hit me, and he broke the yardstick. Of course, you can't get away with that now, but this was the day. And I woke up all, afraid, and I was kind of disoriented. And he said, "Mr. Karakozoff, you're sleeping in my class." And he said, "I bet you're very afraid right now." I said, "Yes, Father, I am." And he said, "I bet you're not afraid of what I'm going to do to you, but you're afraid of what your coach is going to do to you." And in those days, the priests and the coaches were in together, so if you got into detention, then everybody ran on the team. You ran extra sprints. So he said, "Not to worry, because your coach, Tom Kennedy, who was here, who was a great player 10 years before at our high school, used to fall asleep in my class too." Every time I walk by the Dean Brother Draper's office up in our school, and he's still alive in San Francisco, I get shivers down my back. I learned discipline there. At Stanford, I learned development of my mind. And that's one of the things that's in our Stanford Charter, if you ever read it. Exactly, say, the cultivation of the mind. Recruiting was an interesting experience. I had opportunities to go to Stanford, Notre Dame. I just got back to recruiting trips. According to my mom, she had, I think, 37 letters of scholarship for football. They even had one for track. And so at Notre Dame, I got to see Notre Dame beat UCLA in basketball and end the 70-game winning streak they had back in the 70s. At USC, they set me up on a date with a cheerleader. At Stanford, and this is appropriate, they sat me in front of a TV, asked me if I want to have a beer. And then I got to sleep in the fellow that's not here, Brad Williams, what do they call it, the waterbed that didn't work. It was freezing cold, and a broken door. That was my recruiting trip to Stanford. I had some really wonderful memories. 74, Brad, who's not here, leaped over the eventual. Oh, there he is. I saw Brad, in the game that I played in, leap over NFL All-Pro Herman Edwards, setting up a last second 51-yard field goal for Mike Langford. We beat Cal in 74. I have a couple Cal players here, my cousin included. Take that, boys. 1975, we defeated USC with a last second 55-yard field goal. Tied us for first in the conference. And leading us to a Pac-8 championship game against Cal in 75. It was 16 years before Stanford beat USC again. I have some not so fond memories of Stanford. 73, we were up by 9 points against USC with 2 minutes left after several very bad calls. They stopped the clock, and USC was able to beat us by 1 point that year. If we had instant replay in those days, those calls would have been overturned. We would have been Pac-8 champs. 74, we tied with UCLA, and that prevented us to be Pac-8 champions. And again, fortunately, my cousin wasn't playing for Cal then. We lost to Cal in the Pac-8 championship in 1975. So I have one complaint I'll have to mention. In 1975, Stanford turned down the Liberty Bowl. It was the first year Stanford was eligible for a bowl other than the Rose Bowl. And we didn't find out till about 10 years later, so that was very interesting. I saw the most amazing things in a mid-quarter airline trip to a game. I'm a freshman, and I'm on the plane, I'm looking around, and I said, all these guys have books open. And I went up to Randy Podol, another Hall of Famer, and Randy had a long career as defensive back in the NFL. And it was in the Rose Bowl. I said, it was one of the guys who would actually talk to a freshman. And I said, "Randy, what's going on?" He said, "Well, these guys are studying, they got tests." I said, "Really? I mean, we're on the way to a football game." So that was my first, education that Stanford is very serious. Not only the university is very serious, but the students are very serious about their academic accomplishments. I love our doctors. I want to honor one doctor, one of our teammates, Jerry Walvogel, that passed away. Professor of Biological Sciences at Clemson University, was voted the most loved professor at Clemson. In the crowd here is Dr. Bruce Blackstone, who I played with. We played the same position. He's in the audience today. One of my favorites, who's not here, is Dr. Flory Martin, who is the doctor on the Love Boat between Los Angeles and Cabo San Lucas. So they call it the Love Boat. And Flory was one of the most intense linebackers that you'd ever seen. In my era, as I mentioned, 85% of the students went on to graduate school. And we have a long and storied history on not only now athletics, but also academics. And you may not know this, but I don't know if this fact is true, but there's only 2 universities in the United States that have not had NC2A sanctions, and one of them is Stanford. So to do what this athletic department has done, over the years is nothing short of amazing. So I'm very proud and honored to be part of this group. Thank you.